temptation came back, and I couldn't resist. I went in there and looked around and tried on a few things and put them all back and snuck out and shut the door and felt excited and guilty and shame and all that afterwards. But I had agreed with the enemy and said, I'll see where this takes me. So in 2009, I had a first surgery to what's called facial feminization surgery to make your face look more feminine. I started on cross-sex hormones, and I started on electrolysis. And then, that wasn't enough. So in 2010, I did some more facial feminization. In 2011, I did, had GRS, genital reassignment surgery, where they make a male genitalia into a neo-vagina. And
like genital reassignment surgery, would be, potentially life-threatening or dangerous. But what you're indicating is it's not just that. It's also even the breast augmentation, chest augmentation, as well as facial feminization. Even something like that can have risks.
This wasn't who I really was, because I look in the mirror and I saw that amazing man that God created, not this persona that I cooked up and, gave the name Teresa.
But also in this generation that we're living in, where there's such massive confusion about sex and identity and, all kinds of things, I think the Lord wants us to really, as the church, to have profound clarity about who we are as image bearers of God in our masculinity and in our femininity. So I love the fact that God is able to restore even when we've done such outward damage to our bodies. Well, hey friends, we want to welcome you to another episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. Whether you're tuning in through Love and Truth Network or you're coming to us through Transforming Congregations, we are so glad that you're here and that you're a part of this conversation. I am really excited to have you learn a little bit more about my friend Ted and the experiences that he's had, the change that God has brought him through, and just the ongoing work. Ted is just another example of a trophy of grace. Just as everyone listening to this, anyone watching this podcast, you also are a trophy of God's grace. And we are praying and hoping that our time together is something that will encourage you, that will motivate you, that will give you some hope and spur you on to, as Paul says, to love and good deeds. We want to be about that. We want to be about seeing people's lives changed and transformed, and to become abundant in their ministry within the kingdom, and also belonging within the body of Christ. So we're glad that you're here. Ted, I'm so happy that you're here with us. Thank you for joining us for this podcast.
Well, thank you. As always, it's an honor and a privilege to talk to brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm always glad to share the testimony, as the book of Revelation says. They overcame by the word of their testimony and the blood of the Lamb.
That's right.
Doing what I can to share.
No, it's great. Well, let me just give everyone a little bit of the backstory in terms of how you and I met. We're pretty new friends. Ted and I had the opportunity of joining with some other leaders from around the country that were drawn together through the organization of the Change Movement. And we came together in DC and had some great meetings at a couple of different policy councils and family foundations there. So grateful for the different ministries that are there in DC doing vital work. And so we were privileged to be able to utilize some of those facilities. And Ted and I had the opportunity, I don't know how many people, there might have been 40 or so different leaders from around the country. And Ted and I had the opportunity to room together and share a suite. And really happy to have met this brother and heard his story, spent time with him. It's so much more fun to actually spend that kind of quality time getting to know people and being around them for a period of time, as opposed to just, a meal is always nice to get to know people over and that kind of thing. But you and I had a little bit more time together, and I'm really grateful for that. So that's kind of how we met. And I just believe that you and I are going to be, from here on out, lifelong friends, and happy for the connection. And Ted, one of the things I mentioned to you is that anyone who we have on our podcast and we're interviewing and spending some time with, we love it when they just start off our podcast by sharing a little bit of their story. So in the next 10, 15 minutes or so, if you could share with us just a little bit of your background and story, what God has done in your life, we would love to just listen in on that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I will start, and I'll probably have a few aside points, things that I think were important to me that I've learned since that special day on March 14th, 2021. But
absolutely,
in the common vernacular, my story begins. When I was about 8 years old. This was the first episode, and I really don't know why it happened. I would preface by saying usually most people that have an LGBTQ background have some type of trauma in their life. It normally is something like, it could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, it could be molestation, it could be rape or anything like that. It could be a number of things, but I'm not saying I had that or I didn't have that. At least right now, I still haven't quite uncovered that, if that is true in my life. But I know no matter what, we're all sinners in need of a Savior. We live in a fallen world. But many years ago, this would have been about in the mid-'60s. This was before no one had ever heard of a transgender or anything like that. I was 8 years old, and my parents were away. My brother and I were at home, and back in that day, you had about 2 or 3 channels on a TV, and he was in the den watching TV, I think. And for whatever reason, I was in my parents' room. I don't even know why. And I just remember my mom's closet was open, and she had a blue, shiny, sparkly pantsuit. To this day, I remember it just like yesterday. And the name of it was Man Catcher. It's kind of funny. But for some reason, I was strangely drawn to it. I didn't put it on or anything. It just, I just went over and looked, examined it, and I felt an attraction to women's clothing for some unknown reason. My mother and father, we had a good home life. I had a brother that's 4 years older. Went to church every Sunday. My dad was a deacon. My mom, and again, this is in the mid-'60s, nothing out of the ordinary. Just a good family life. So anyway, that was the first thing I recall. Then for some reason, again, about 4 or 5 years later, I started having an attraction to women's shoes and go-go boots. At the time, I was in the band. And I remember about that time, I know this sounds crazy, but again, no influences from the outside. I just started feeling like I was born in the wrong body. And I remember very clearly, one night praying to God to make me a girl. Again, up to age 14, no abuse. I know it's very common for adolescents when they're going through this to question things and wonder who they are. And, but again, it was kind of strange. And probably right after that was my, first kind of adventure with it, in the way that I grew up in Alabama. And at age 14, back then, you could, get a motorcycle license. And I had a motorcycle, and I delivered papers every day. And this was one of the first crazy things in my life was when I was about, 14 or 15, I got on my motorcycle and went to the local department store and bought a pair of boots for my sister for her birthday.
Yeah.
But they're really for me.
Got it.
I mean, oh my gosh. It was exhilaration and guilt all bundled together. I mean, I was excited, but I was scared. I didn't know. I mean, again, thinking back, this was, about 1972, 73. Again, no one's ever heard of transgender. I'd never heard of a cross-dresser, never heard of anything like that. It was just weird to me. So anyway, a few years later, again, it seemed to kind of go off and on. Not really much. I did tell my mother at that time, and she just told me to get rid of them, and I did, and that was kind of it for a few years. So then I remember another episode when I was in college. One summer, I was working up in Tennessee, and this would have been probably about, I don't know, 1980. And was working, I lived in the second story of a house. The bottom story was a dentist office. The second story was like 3 or 4 rooms that they rented out to college students because it was in Knoxville, Tennessee. And don't ask me why this lady, a college student, had given me the keys to her room, and temptation came back. And I couldn't resist. I went in there and looked around and tried on a few things and put them all back and snuck out and shut the door and felt excited and guilty and shame and all that afterwards. But the thing that was kind of interesting is like it's like I couldn't help myself. I knew it was wrong because I was brought up in a Christian home. And I was also, in high school and in college, I was walking with God. I was involved.
When did you come to faith? I don't remember if you mentioned that, Ted.
I haven't yet, but probably around 14 years of age.
Okay.
I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and it wasn't in the church itself, but at a citywide crusade, I believe that's when I accepted Christ. And it was a genuine conversion. Before this time, I had a potty mouth, and when Jesus came in, he cleaned me up. And I mean, I was actually looking back, during my high school years, I was actually part of the Jesus Revolution. Yeah. Just like that movie. That revolution, that revival was very real. It spread all across the country from California to the east. And myself, I was walking with Jesus, involved with Bible study, memorizing scripture, doing evangelism. I mean, I just had a heart for the Lord. And, at that time in a high school of about 1,200, sometimes in the morning, we'd have a devotion club that me and some other guys would lead, and we'd have 100 people in the devotion club.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine that today?
Yeah, amazing.
Literally almost 10% of the whole high school. So Jesus was alive in my life. I was living for him, but still I had these struggles. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't want them. I was very ashamed of them. But it just seems like they would hit me from time to time. So then that was kind of about it for a while. I got married in the mid 80s. And unfortunately, that didn't work out. But during that time, we did adopt some children. And all I can say is there was a few episodes during my marriage, but I got the ultimatum one day, and I came to Jesus, and I guess for about 10 years, it seemed to just go away. So, that was good. And then about 1999, I got divorced. And and again, it wasn't really an issue, but the sad thing was I was single. I was a custodial father of 5 children. And a couple years after getting divorced, I started dating ladies, and, not that I'm proud of, but was not practicing moral purity. And, dated several ladies, even got engaged to one. It just seemed like they all failed. I dated one lady about 6 years. And again, this wasn't an issue or much of a temptation. But after it ended, it seems like I kind of had a crisis of faith. One, seems like every time I dated somebody, my chooser was broken and it failed. Number 2, these feelings, just like out of the blue, just came back raging, my doubting who I was. that God had made me a girl and in the wrong body, and just, I was not living in the right relationship with God, because when you start doing things that are unbiblical, it tends to chip away at your faith.
Sure.
But again, since I'd broken up with this lady, and these feelings of being born inside a rock body, which, started very young, they kind of come to an apex, a critical point. And this was about 2009. And during that time, this was, again, cross-dressing, and the internet wasn't much out there. But I did find through the internet that there was a group nationwide called SIGEP. And I would go on weekends once a month to Atlanta and play Barbie, dress up. And for those that don't know, back then, SIGEP was about the only outlet. But in big cities, I know it sounds crazy, but those heterosexual cross-dresser group, that's just about all they would do, is just cross-dress. Now, I do want to say, as an aside, the spectrum of gender identity is quite wide. It can be just identifying it mentally, to all the other way of being a transgender and cutting off body parts, mutilating yourself, and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's how far I went. But initially, I would go on the weekends up once a month to Atlanta. It was in my local area. And there were, like-minded people. Like I said, birds of a feather flock together. And, I learned, and unfortunately learned some of the things how to do, anyway, improving those unfortunate skills. So about 2009, I was, because when you embrace something, and at this time I'd done one of the things that's, I think, is very critical, to never agree with your enemy. I had agreed with the enemy and said, I'll see where this takes me. So in 2009, I had a first surgery to what's called facial feminization surgery, to make your face look more feminine. I started on cross-sex hormones, and I started on electrolysis. I mean, I don't have a beard anymore. I had every single one removed. Very painful, very painful. And then, that wasn't enough. So in 2010, I did some more facial feminization. In 2011, I did, had GRS, genital reassignment surgery, where, anyway, they make a male genitalia into a neo-vagina. And after that, I got my birth certificate changed. I got my driver's license, everything changed. And,
and how old were you, Ted, at that point? How old were you when you went through the bottom surgery?
I was 52.
Okay.
And see, this again is before the current rage of, being transgender. I was an oddity. I mean, there was literally 2 or 3 doctors in the U.S. that did this stuff, bottom surgery, and most people went to Thailand. And, I knew a lot of people that did. So in 2012, I did the top surgery, which means I got a breast augmentation, just like a woman would get, if they had breast cancer, reconstruction. But I want people to know that these surgeries are very dangerous. They're irreversible.
Yep.
I will never have a male anatomy again. I have 2-foot scars across my chest when I had them eventually taken out. A friend of mine almost died. He had to have a blood transfusion. I do know of several people that have died in these surgeries. And, you don't hear that.
No.
You don't hear that.
And are you talking about the dangers of right now? Are you referring to top surgery when you say that, when you mentioned?
I'm talking about any of them. I know a guy that died from facial feminization.
Okay.
I know another guy that died of, genital reassignment or bottom surgery. That's just me. Yeah. That's just ones I know of.
Sure. Well, and the reason I ask that, Ted, is because I think that a lot of people would be pretty quick to understand how like genital reassignment surgery, that would be, potentially life-threatening or dangerous. But what you're indicating is it's not just that. It's also even the breast augmentation, chest augmentation, as well as facial feminization. Even something like that can have risks.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially when you do with the face, those are huge. I mean, I know one guy that did die, and I know another guy that almost died because of infections and you're monkeying around with stuff that God didn't intend.
Yep.
So anyway, in 2012, I was happy. I was happy. I would look at myself in the mirror and pinch me because I finally looked like what I saw in the mirror. And I thought my body and my mind were, one and the same. They weren't fighting one another. I finally had arrived. Another thing too is, truly honest, I was very happy. I was very happy. I had lots of friends. I had a really good buddy. We'd do stuff. It was just, just a friendship and, travel and stuff like that. And during this time too, I went to a transgender affirming church, and I was even an elder for 4 years. And so anyway, for a while, things were good. And the analogy I like to tell people is it's like buying that expensive, shiny car. Of course, yes, all through this, I spent tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
There was no insurance to pay for it. It came out of my pocket. So I was not today, anyway, it seems like insurance and pays for it, but not back then. And yes, it was well into the tens of thousands of dollars. So, but that shiny car eventually starts having problems, or it gets old, it doesn't look as good, and you get buyer's remorse. And so for about 8-10 years, I was happy. Then all of a sudden, I started having this dissonance come back, but in a different way. And this time it was, did I make a mistake? This wasn't who I really was, because I look in the mirror and I saw that amazing man that God created, not this persona that I cooked up and, gave the name Teresa. And this was about 2020 when COVID had hit. And part of it was my son had encouraged me to watch some films by a guy named Trey Smith, God in a Nutshell. And it got me kind of thinking back about God and, who he really was, because he goes deep into that stuff. And so anyway, fast forward, I started having feelings of dissonance. I started having feelings of darkness and doubt, and even feelings of suicide, that I had really messed up. That this was not what God wanted me to do. It wasn't who he made me. And I had made a huge mistake, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So during this time, my family, they set boundaries. My brother and sister and children set boundaries. My brother and sister always called me by my first name, even when I didn't look like it. And,
your birth name, right? Your birth name.
Right. Yeah. Ted, my real name, the one that I was given at birth. And, they refused to call me by my fake name. And I praise God for that, because that is, to me, the right thing to do, at least for me. And so after, in 2021, these feelings just got really, really intense, very dark, I was to the point I didn't know what I was going to do, because I couldn't keep on like this. And part of me, which no matter how you change your exterior, it doesn't change your heart or who you really are. I always got to be tinkering or something. At the time I was fixing TVs, when I was younger, I fixed motorcycles and cars and stuff like that. And just the tinkering part of me never went away. So my sister had given me a TV to fix, and I'd fixed it and was taking it back to her. And before this, I had prayed to God, quite regularly, God, if you want me to detransition, hit me upside the head with a baseball bat. Because if you ask your wife Garry, she'll say, we're pretty dense. I don't take hints very well. And God normally speaks in a still small voice. I said, God, you can't do that. It's going to have to be really loud and a baseball bat or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you pray that, you better be careful. He might just answer you.
Yeah.
So that eventful day of March 14th, 2021, I went to my sister's, took the TV back, and there wasn't anybody at her house but her. And she's a spirit-filled, godly lady, just really loves the Lord, and just a wonderful Christian lady who, knows how to fight spiritually and spiritual warfare. And I said, Mary Lou, can we go on the back porch and talk? And I just started bawling, crying. I just poured my heart to her that I had messed up, that, I had ruined my body, and, just some other things that were just eating at my soul. And she asked me, she said, Ted, my real name, have you ever had been anointed with oil, and can I pray for you? And I said, I think I have, because, in my years, through high school and through college and most of my married life, I really was walking with God. But I tried to pray this stuff away, but it just would not go. At times it would be so compulsive. It's just, I guess it's not much different than a drug addict or alcoholic or a smoker. You just can't stop yourself. And that happened to me. So I sat down, and before she prayed, she said, hold on, something big's going to happen. She was laughing, and I laughed. And so she anointed my head with oil and prayed for me, and taking authority and casting out, the spiritual strongholds of perversion and of suicide and, other, I don't even remember, several things.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. I was still very doubtful what I needed to do, because I still had this terrible tension in me. So anyway, it was about 3:30. I had to go home because my granddaughter lived with me, and she's probably, aside from God, she was what kept me alive. If I had not had her, living with me, I probably would have not be here today. But those two things. So anyway, I get in my truck and start driving home, and this is what's weird. 8 years earlier, my dad had told me about a sportsplex the city had built, has a gym, an indoor pool, tennis courts, pickleball, soccer, softball, whatever, just, big facility, walking track. And why on March 14th did I decide to go see that 8 years later? I have no idea. But I did. Turns out if I had not, I might not be here again here either. So anyway, I, start going slowly around, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, I just start crying uncontrollably. And I didn't know what was going on. I'll just make this brief, but it was a baseball bat experience. I felt like someone was squeezing me. I couldn't breathe. I was, sort of like choking me. And just going, real loud. And the crazy thing is, it happened 7 times. And I honestly believe,
as you were going around the sports complex?
Well, I would stop because I was going really slow. I'd stop, and it would take about 20, 30 seconds. My sister even, I called her during one of these, and she heard it and heard, real voices. So I really believe that 7 spirits, demons, oppression, whatever you want to call it, left me, because immediately after that, it was like being in a dark room with the lights off and the curtain closed, and all of a sudden someone turns on the light, opens the, the blinds. It's a sunny day. I saw that my sinfulness, what I'd done, was so wrong that, this was not who God made me, that it was, I had disobeyed him. And that I repented, I asked him to forgive me. It was just like right then, all those desires just went poof.
Wow.
And so, after that, I continued to get back in the Word. And probably the hardest thing in my life was for 4 months, I had to wait to have my, fake breast removed. And I looked in the mirror, and this time I saw who I was in my mind. But when I looked in the mirror, I had to live with that for a few months, because I couldn't really present as a man with boobs and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I had to play along for a few months. But again, once that, I was so freed that Jesus had been merciful to me and brought me back. And since then, I'm not the same as and doing everything I can to tell people the truth.
Wow. Well, and that's awesome, so Ted. Thank you so much. That's your story. Yeah.
That's
was there anything else you wanted to add? I don't want to. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm good. That's just the short of it.
Okay.
The things we've done together, and I guess you're probably going to go into that now.
Yeah, Ted, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I mean, there's so much to it. I really would love to come back around and just ask you a few questions about that for some clarity and just some deeper understanding for my audience, our audience, but also for myself. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear on too, is that throughout all of this, like, you were heterosexual. There was no same-sex attraction involved in any of this. That has never changed for you, correct?
No, never did. I mean, I know I've had that question asked, and one guy asked me that when we were talking, a few months ago, and he about fell out of the chair. He said, "I thought everyone that went down this was gay." I said, "No." Well, and the reason I want to ask you that is because there's a whole bunch of people that aren't. I mean, you had a whole network of guys that you connected with who cross-dressed and were totally heterosexual, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes the wives are very supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people that have transitioned, and I know of a guy that's fully transitioned. He's been married to the same lady for 30 years, and they appear to be happily married. I mean, I don't get it, but I do know most of the time when men go down this road, it does end in divorce, usually.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was thinking of as you were sharing, as you talked about that period, and I think it's really important that you share that, hey, there was a pretty long period of 6, 7, 8 years where you were really happy with having made this transition, or taking on the outer appearance of a woman. And you also mentioned the idea of it felt like your outer appearance finally matched the wrestling that you've been going through earlier in life, that finally it felt congruent. But the thing that also struck me in what you were saying about that is, of course, people can be happy making decisions that are apart from Christ, even certainly as unbelievers, for sure. But sometimes as believers, there's a period of time where something's euphoric, or something we've been under pressure for so long that when we finally get out from under it, it feels like, for example, coming out as gay for me, it felt like, oh, finally the pressure's off. It feels like this is the true me. And there's a period of euphoria for some time. But the thing that always strikes me when I hear a story like yours, and many others, is there might have been a period of happiness, but what was the purpose of life? What was the value in terms of like an eternal purpose or an eternal value, or really belonging in the body of Christ? I mean, those things seem, and I'd love for you to obviously speak to this, but it seems like those things wind up getting kind of lost in trying to sort of discover ourselves, and we wind up losing so much kind of time and opportunity getting wrapped up in this pursuit that ultimately has no eternal value. What is your thought about that?
You a nail on the head. I think of the Bible verse where it says God will redeem the years that the locusts ate up.
Yeah.
And this definitely was a period of locusts eating up. I look back at, I don't know, not living morally pure, even when I was, unmarried and this. So I look back, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of good family time during this and things like that. Not that everything was bad, but
right.
I sure wish I could turn back the hands of time and know what I know now and never do this. Yes, it took this is the thing people don't realize. I know you do, but it not only takes a toll on you, it took a toll on my children.
Yeah.
It took a toll on my dad, my brother, my sister, my cousins, my close friends. My friends in high school, they all cut me off.
Yeah.
The ones that were Christians. And when I came back to the Lord, I was able to reconcile with them and confess my sin. But I've lost, 15, 20 years of walking down the wrong road in the far country.
Yep.
And if I could ever go back, which I can't, the most that we could do is as Paul says, God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we mess up, he can flip it and make, what little time I have left on earth and, you or any of us, as best we can. Because I promise you, almost 3 years ago when the Lord brought me back, I could never have dreamed what has happened. That I would be talking about it, that I've been to Washington, D.C., I've been to Florida, I've been to Louisiana, and, just the amazingness that, God takes our craziness and turns it to good.
It's so true. Yeah.
I do want to share this. It's kind of a chuckle to me. I'm not totally sure, but I think when we walk in sin that God allows judgment to come upon us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never shared this before because the light just went on. It's shortly after I transitioned out of the sun that, for whatever reason, I'll just say, took a coin collection I had. And I laugh now looking back because that all that money I spent on my transition, it's like God said, I'm going to laugh at you. I'm going to take it back from you. And it's crazy. The amount I spent was almost exactly what that coin collection was worth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I forgive my son, but it just kind of, not saying God did do that, but it sure seems like it. And
just,
we walk against God and fight against him. And,
it doesn't ever turn out well for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not a good thing to do. As a man reaps, so he sows. And that's what I was doing.
Or rather, as a man sows, so he reaps, right?
That's what I meant.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
You reap what you sow.
Right, exactly. And so but what you were saying earlier, just a moment ago, Ted, I think is so critical for certainly for you to grasp and for me to grasp and for those that are listening or watching this podcast, that the reality is that no one else but God, no one else but Jesus Christ, no one else but the Holy Spirit can actually take the kind of brokenness that we've embraced at one time, the identities that we embraced, the really working against God's identity in our lives and establishing our own sense of identity. No one can take us from those ashes and what feels like a complete and utter disaster when we wake up and see what we've done and what we've participated in. Nobody can restore the way God can restore, and the idea so that true. he can actually there's there's certain things that can never be replaced. I oftentimes quote and mention Abigail Shrier's book, Irreversible Damage. And it's such an important book that she's writing specifically about the transgender, rapid onset gender dysphoria phenomenon happening amongst primarily girls, but some of that applies to boys too. But that name, Irreversible Damage, is so applicable and such an appropriate name for that book, because we can do such irreversible damage in one sense to our bodies, and yet God is able to restore your masculine soul and my masculine soul to a degree that we can actually be fully engaged once again in his kingdom work through repentance and his restoration, and fully embrace we are men made in the image of God, and that's all there is to it. And that's a glorious thing to be.
It is.
And for women made in the image of God, that's a glorious thing to be, of equal value to men, but of distinct kind of revelation of who God is through the feminine and through the masculine, and it's so vital that we learn how to live that out with integrity and get to. I just feel like that reality of being a man made in God's image, for us as guys, and for women being made a woman in his image, we get to, if we would explore the depths of that. I mean, I don't think there's, through the rest of our lives, I don't think that we could mine the deepest value of what that even means. I think we can explore and understand, like, how can I really strengthen as a man made in God's image? How can I help secure my brothers in their faith? How can I help lead other men who don't yet know Jesus into this fuller understanding, or into this full understanding of who he is? How can I introduce them to him, not only as a savior and Lord, but also in this generation that we're living in, where there's such massive confusion about sex and identity and all kinds of things. I think the Lord wants us to really, as the church, to have profound clarity about who we are as image bearers of God in our masculinity and in our femininity. So I love the fact that God is able to restore even when we've done such outward damage to our bodies.
Oh, yes. So true. So true. I couldn't agree more. And see, to piggyback on that, I have scars on my body that I'll go to the grave with. But, the thing I think about is just like the scars Christ has for us in his wrists and in his feet. I have scars that remind me, of the price he paid for me. And, when I think about that, it just makes me want to weep. That why would he give me a second chance? Why would he pull me back from the far country, from living a self-destructive life? But it's because he loves us so much.
Yes.
And if people could just grasp that a little bit, they would run to him, like you and I have, and others.
Yeah.
And another thing that's important to remember is that, as you said, is the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Right.
And Jesus came that we might have life and have it abundantly. That's what we are experiencing.
Yes.
But, the kill, steal, and destroy is quite literal. I was on a course to take my life. The thief had messed my mind up, and I bought the lie. And see, that's another thing, too, is that part of this was I bought the lie, just like Eve did in Adam in the garden. This knocking on my door that, you're really a girl in a man's body. I bought that lie, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And it's a lie. And it's so important. It's been part of my recovery, is to get deeply immersed in the Word, to understand that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God made me in his image, and he made us male and female. I used to think a combination and meant some combination. No, it's, if you look at it in the language, it's very explicit: male, female, nothing mixed together.
Yep.
And it's where you try and mix those things up, And the sad thing is, and you don't hear a lot about this, is that when, I guess it really doesn't matter what age, but when people go down this transition road, the suicide rate increases like 20 to 40%. So it's not a solution. I mean, and these things are irreversible. I'll never have my male anatomy back. You start at a young age and you'll never be fully developed on puberty blockers.
Right.
You'll never come to maturity to be the man or woman that God designed you to be and to enjoy his gifts in the bounds of marriage.
Yep. Well, it seems like we're having this massive experiment too, that, and you mentioned when we get on puberty blockers and that kind of thing at an early age, even things like bone development and brain development, we don't have any idea what these off-label so-called treatments are doing to children. I mean, we have quite a good idea of where it's leading them and the destruction that they're going down, the path that they're going down, but we have no long-term understanding of how it's going to affect their bodies over the course of time. And that's a huge concern. You mentioned the suicide rate. I've read that the suicide rate is actually, for those who are post-surgery, for those that go through that, I don't know if it's top and bottom or one or the other, but after surgery, that at some point the suicide, not just attempt, but actual suicide is 19 times that of the average population, not 19%, but 19 times that of the average population. The other thing that I've read is that, in multiple sources, is that it is usually, I think, and you're a great example of this, and that's why I'm bringing it up, is that it's around 10 years or so that where many people begin to feel this deep sense of regret about what they've done. Now, for many, I think it happens sooner than that, but for a good number, it's actually significantly longer than into the 8 to 10 year time frame, 12-year time frame, where they start to feel like, what have I done? They begin to feel the incongruence of what once felt congruent in this change that they've made to their bodies. That again is irreversible on some levels. Obviously, you've done everything that you can to reverse what you can, but there's limitations, right?
Now, the only thing I could undo is this.
Yep.
I mean, I can't undo the bone that was shaved from my face. I can't undo the bone they took off here and other things like that. I mean, you can't undo that.
Thank you for joining us for this week's podcast. Please join us next week for part 2 of this interview.